So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to have the chance to talk with you something about Chinese culture as reflected from Chinese characters. And here's the brief outline of the lecture. The lecture will be in 4 parts. The first part will be the introduction to the development of Chinese characters. The second part will be an introduction to the vertical and horizontal writing. The third one will be how written Chinese has survived in history. And the last part will be the future of Chinese language. Now, to warm you up, I'd like you to answer one of the questions here. Now, since you have been in China for a while, from your learning experience, do you think that Chinese characters are easy to learn? No? Why not? What makes it difficult to learn? Would you like to answer that question?
It's hard to memorize each character, like shape and order. So every time after I practice to write, but I forget often.
You forget about it. Okay. So do you study the Chinese characters as words or as pictures?
I think picture.
Pictures, right? Okay. Well, it's a very good answer, actually. That will bring us to the study of Chinese characters. Now, let's have a look at a brief history of the Chinese characters, from pictures to characters. Yeah? Now, Chinese words have had a long history of more than 3,500 years. They can be traced to a time when people made records in daily life by tying knots in ropes and strings. And that is, as you know, a very easy way, a very simple way to make records. But that will not record a lot of things, as you know, right? So the most acceptable legend of the inventor of Chinese characters is a person named Cang Jie, who recorded the history in the court of Huangdi. And the legend goes like this. One day, Cang Jie was standing in the snow, and he noticed that some birds were walking in front of him. And he said he noticed that the birds left some footprints on the snow, and he thought that it would be a good idea to, change the shapes of the footprints into characters so that they could record events. And that is believed to be the way that Chinese characters were invented. Now, after its invention, Chinese characters went through several stages. And as we know, the first stage is called oracle characters, what we call in Chinese 甲骨文. And so that is the earliest form of Chinese characters. And the second stage is called bronze characters. And these characters, as it is seen from the term itself, were discovered on the bronzeware. So that's why it is called bronze characters. In Chinese, we say 金文. And the third stage is seal characters. In Chinese, we say 篆书. From 222 BC to 200 AD, seal characters. And immediately after that, we will see modern Chinese characters, 现代文字, since the year 200 AD. Okay? So those are the 4 stages of Chinese characters. Now, these are pictures of the earliest forms of Chinese characters inscribed on the shells or bones of animals. Okay? Now here, if you look at these pictures, I'm using the word pictures, not characters, right? The first row is oracle characters. So can you make a guess what character it is? The first line? Is it easy or hard to guess? Hard. Just make a wild guess. snake. Does it look like a snake? A bit. Actually, it is the tiger. Yes. You see that it has the face. For example, the first one on the left, it has the face, the eyes, the claws, and the tail. Right? Yeah. So these characters are found on the bones of animals. Yeah, the oracle characters. And then later on, you'll find that the bronze characters discovered on bronzeware are quite similar to the oracle characters, right? They are not dramatically different from each other. See, some of the tigers are standing there, and some are lying on the bottom, and also some are like fighting, right? Very vivid pictures. So they are not words, they are not characters. And some examples of bronze characters, especially the one on the left, they are written on the bronzeware, right? But it is very hard to identify what characters they are, since they are so complicated, right? Now, some characteristics of oracle and bronze characters. The pictures, these characters are pictures instead of characters, as you already saw it just now, right? And second, few characters could describe abstract ideas. We have mountains, like, for example, rivers, the sun, the moon, all of those things, which can be very easily drawn as pictures. But there are some abstract ideas. At that time, people had no characters to describe the abstract ideas. And then three, all of these characters have many strokes, and they are very complicated and very difficult to learn. And number four, I already talked about number four, very difficult to learn and write, right? So there came the first change in the Western Zhou dynasty because it was so difficult to learn and write. At that time, in the first change of the Chinese characters, lines got better proportioned and balanced. And characters became more standardized. And also the shape got squarer, not that long. Some of the pictures, actually, pictographs we call, were pretty long. And then gradually they became squarer and squarer. Okay? Seal characters are divided into two types, 大篆 and 小篆, meaning big seal characters and small seal characters. So you can see here, these are examples of 大篆, big seal characters, right? And although 大篆 was regular and standardized, it had many strokes, which proved to be very difficult to write with the brush, which is the main writing tool in ancient China. So it was later modified into 小篆, the small seal characters in the Qin dynasty, a much simpler writing system. So you can see that Emperor Qin promoted it to be used by all the 7 states in his time, which he united as the China that you know today. Okay, so Emperor Qin Shi Huang is somebody you have to remember, because he was the person who united China into one nation, and he also united the Chinese written language. So that's the contribution that he made. Okay, now this is an example of the small seal characters, 小篆. Do you think that they are simpler to write, easier to write? Yes, right? Yeah, so this is the kind of written language that Emperor Qin Shi Huang promoted to all the 7 states in China when he united the country. More examples of 小篆, which are also pictographic, Now, seal characters have gone out of use today. Nobody writes like this today. But there's only one occasion where we still use seal characters, and that is when we make seals. Okay, so these 2 pictures are seals in two types. One is called yin wen, the other is called yang wen. Yin and yang in Chinese culture. I guess someone probably has the idea of what yin and yang means, right? So yin wen and yang wen. That is the place where we still use seal characters. Yeah. And gradually, people found that the rectangular-shaped xiaozhuan hard to write with the brush. So in the Han Dynasty, people started to expand the characters on two sides so that they became even squarer and easier to write. It was simplified once more. The new style of characters is called Li Shu, which became the foundation of the characters that we use today. What does Li Shu look like? So this is an example of Li Shu. So you see, all the characters are very regular in shape, and they are very square, very well balanced, right? So it is the foundation of the written language that we use today. What do you think of this? Can you recognize anything from it? Hardly, right? This is called cursive writing. In Chinese, we say 草书. 草书, cursive writing, is the later development of Li Shu in the Tang Dynasty. And it is a freer style of writing, and as you can see, it is more artistic. One more example of it will show you that you can hardly separate one character from another, right? And we say that it is like the floating cloud and the flowing water. So that's the spirit of cursive writing in Chinese. Now that will bring us to some facts to remember. First, China did not get united until the Qin Dynasty in 210 BC by Emperor Qin Shi Huang. That's the emperor that I told you about, and it is very important to remember him. Second, that brought about the unification of Chinese characters among all the 7 states for the first time. And third, Chinese characters became stabilized with the appearance of Kaishu in the Tang Dynasty. Kaishu is something which is very close to the written words that we use today. Okay? So you can see, although this is traditional Chinese, not simplified Chinese. Okay? Well, very soon after that, a person named Bi Sheng in the Song Dynasty invented a kind of printing system, which is called the movable type printing system. Since the invention of this new printing system that uses movable components to reproduce characters, another writing style that was more suitable for printing was developed, and that is called Songti, which is exactly what we use today in typing with the computer. So very often we use the type of font which is called Songti when we type. Okay. Now you can see these are pictures of the movable components of printing here. Okay. And this is a book printed in that way, produced by that kind of printing system. It's quite clear, right? And this picture is very interesting. If you have watched the 2008 Olympic Games, the opening ceremony, probably you have some impression of this picture. Do you know what it is? It's a display of the movable type printing in the opening ceremony of the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games to demonstrate the glorious ancient Chinese civilization to the world. Right? Okay. Now let's move on to the second part of my talk, which is an introduction to the vertical and horizontal writing. As you know that most languages in the world are written horizontally, right? Like English, French, many other languages in the world, they are written horizontally. But why was Chinese written vertically? Do you know why?
To be special?
Pardon?
To be special or maybe?
To be special? Well, I'm not that sure about that answer, but I can give you some of my answers. Okay. Now, as you know, Chinese characters were originally written vertically instead of horizontally, and that also influenced the writing in some countries like Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and Singapore. Okay, the Japanese still use the vertical writing today. Vertical writing is popular among Chinese people who use traditional Chinese now, like people in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in Macau, and some overseas Chinese. They still use vertical writing and traditional Chinese. Okay. Now why? Due to the fact that the characters were originally written on bamboo slips. Okay. It was common practice that people wrote vertically from the right to the left instead of from the left to the right. In this way, people writing with long and wide sleeves, you have seen from some movies or TV series that ancient Chinese people wore very long and wide sleeves. So people dressed like that when they wrote, they had to take care not to smear or stain the characters already written on the right. Okay, and it also made it easier to fold and unfold the scroll of bamboo slips from the left to the right. And this is a scroll of bamboo slips that had characters written on them. So in order to fold and unfold it, you have to do it from the left to the right. And that's mainly the reason why Chinese was written vertically instead of horizontally. Okay. Now, it was not until the May 4th movement at the beginning of the 20th century that some Chinese scholars began to realize the advantages of horizontal writing and printing. And on January the 1st, 1955, Chinese people saw the newspaper printed horizontally for the first time. And that was a language reform that the Chinese government made to accommodate to the characters, the simplified Chinese characters, and the occasional use of some foreign languages, especially Arabic and Roman numerals. They had to be written horizontally, right? So that was a kind of language reform. Now, while traditional and vertical writing or printing is still widely used today in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Macau, and by the overseas Chinese, as I told you, it is used in mainland China only for artistic purposes and on special occasions. Now, I'll give you some examples here. Look at this. We call them couplets. Okay? 2 lines of poems written vertically. And you usually put them on door frames on special occasions, like on the Spring Festival. People put these couplets on the door frames in order to bring good luck to the family. Okay, so that is one occasion we still use vertical writing. And in calligraphy, too. Whenever people write calligraphy, they usually write vertically. Okay? And also, when people use Chinese characters as decoration, not for practical uses, they sometimes write vertically too. Okay. And that will bring us to the third part of the talk, how written Chinese has survived. Why did I ask this question? Because as you know, that Chinese, together with 2 other languages, the ancient Egyptian and Sumerian, was one of the oldest languages in the world, right? While the other 2 have gone out of use for a long time, they have been dead for a long time, Chinese language is still active in use. And how has it survived? And that is a question that probably you can think of. I'll give you 3 reasons to explain it. The first reason is simplification. Now, in order to increase the efficiency of writing, people have simplified Chinese characters many times in history. Okay? And the following is an example of the evolution of one character, as you can see it here. Can you guess what this character means? Yes? What is it?
It's sun rising for the trees, so it's east.
Sun rising?
For the trees.
East?
East.
No. Well, I think the simplified character is very close to the character of east, but it's not the east. It's carriage. You can see from those characters above, the shape. They have 2 wheels. Did you notice that? And a cover, right? Some of the carriages are simple, while others are quite comfortable, actually. I think some are made for the king or the queen, right? Look at the 2 in the bottom line. So, from pictures to characters, Chinese characters have gone through many stages of simplification, and that is how it sustained its own life. Okay, so this is the first reason. I can give you another example to show the opposite case. Some other characters which have gone out of use because of the disappearance of the ancient lifestyle, they remain unchanged, these characters, such as the names of the bronzeware mostly produced in the Western Zhou dynasty more than 4,000 years ago. And some of these characters are not even legible to many Chinese speakers, like me myself. I can show you some characters here. How many of you can recognize like 5 characters from them? And I could only, guess the meaning of 3 or 4 of them, because these vessels have been out of use for a long, long time, and the characters together with them have disappeared from our life. So they have not gone through simplifications, and that's how that they are forgotten today. Now, the second way for the Chinese characters to sustain its life is the new and creative use of the old or even dead characters. Now, I gave you an example there. Can you guess the meaning of that character there? It is a pictographic character, right? Its original meaning is bright daylight from a window. So you see the window frame and the daylight. But that character has disappeared from our life for a long time. And then, very recently, it came back to life again. But when it came back, it acquired another meaning which is completely different from its original one. Now, when we use that character, which is pronounced as Jiong, we mean feeling embarrassed or frustrated. Probably the meaning got from the look of that character is like a face of a person with an unhappy expression, right? That's, what I guess. So the new and creative use of old characters also gave life to old characters. That's the second way. And the third way is in local dialects. People still use a lot of old words in local dialects. Like this one, which I put on the screen. Can anybody recognize that character? It's pronounced as biang. It's a very strange pronunciation, actually. And it refers to a kind of noodle in Xi'an, Shanxi province. So, in my own interpretation, I think that the inventor of that character has put all the process of making the noodle into that character. So you can see how complicated it is, right? Nobody can remember how to write it if Chinese language is like that. It takes such a long time to write something. But in local dialects, people still use these kind of characters. And the fourth way for Chinese characters to survive is the conscious protection of these characters by people. For example, in the art of calligraphy and painting, people have consciously retained the life of some characters which have disappeared from our daily use. I can show you some examples here. See, this is calligraphy. You can hardly recognize any one of them, right? But they still appear in calligraphy. And this one too, right? Another conscious effort that people made to retain the life of Chinese characters is in museums. Now, this is the first museum of Chinese characters that was recently built in the city of Anyang in Henan province. So in the museum, you can see the development of Chinese characters, many different types of Chinese characters, as well as the printing machines. So if you go to visit Henan province, probably you can think of paying a visit to the museum in the city of Anyang. Okay. Now let me summarize briefly some general characteristics of Chinese characters. Now, number one, it is one of the oldest languages in the world that is still in use today, right, as I told you earlier. Second, it is still quite pictographic. You can still guess the meaning from the look of it, the shape of it. And third, it is a written language is used by the majority of people across the country. The majority, I mean the Han, right? And many minority groups also, they use the same written language. Now, in spite of the fact that there are 8 different dialect zones in China, the written language of the Chinese helps people communicate with each other very well across the country, and it keeps the country and nation as one. Otherwise, now if you meet a person from Guangdong and a person from Beijing, they can hardly communicate verbally with each other, but they share the same written language, and that is how they communicate with each other, and they identify with each other culturally. Okay? Now, it is this written language that keeps the nation as an imagined community. I'm quoting actually a scholar called Benedict Anderson's words, the imagined community. Okay? Okay, so we'll go to the fourth part of the talk, the future of the written Chinese language. What will happen to the Chinese language in the future, the written language? Now, as you know, compared with some Latin languages, Chinese characters, although having been simplified many times in history, still carry with them many traces of ancient Chinese civilization. Some people claim that Chinese characters should be Latinized, and a lot of people are against the idea because we think that Chinese characters carry with them the traces of Chinese civilization, right? We call it the living fossil of Chinese culture. So that's why some people are very strongly against it. Now, these characters tell us who we are, where we are from. They are not only significant in its practical sense, but also in its archaeological, anthropological, historical, and cultural senses. And that's something that we all know. The transnational and transregional feature also helps promote and strengthen the influence of Chinese culture worldwide. As I said that the Chinese characters are still used in countries like Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Singapore, and in the regions like Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and by the overseas Chinese. So it has still a very big influence in the world. But at the same time, some Chinese characters are still pretty complicated, as you said at the beginning of this lecture today. Still very complicated and hard to learn. But thanks to China's rise in its economic and political status in the world in the recent decades, Chinese language and culture is getting more and more recognized. And right now, around the world, so many people are learning the Chinese language, right? So I think that we have some good reasons to believe that Chinese language, an old language still full of vitality today, will become one of the international languages like English someday in the near future. And I think that probably you share with me in the hope, right? It will become one of the international languages in the future. Okay, so that is briefly what I want to say today to you. I also provided you with a bibliography, some books that you can read if you are interested in knowing more about Chinese characters. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. That is the end of my talk. Thank you very much.